Alright YouTube, so what's going on? This is Gabe. So here you can see concepts of the armor I will be showing you guys how to make today. It's based off of a lot of fantasy, like almost orcish designs. You see there's a lot of spikes, there's a lot of metal, and a lot of like hard edges. Here you see me laying down on the floor with a big piece of paper, just a big piece of graph paper, and Caden is tracing out the outline of the pauldron, the big pauldron that goes on my left shoulder. This is an important part called this patterning, and basically what it does is it makes sure that you know what your pieces will look like. So here you see him like truing up the lines, erasing stuff, making sure that everything's straight. Now what we're doing here is we take the patterns that we cut out of the paper and we transfer it onto the EVA foam. And this is what we're going to be making the main body of the armor out of EVA. Here you see us using X-Acto knives to cut out the shape, the silhouette of the pieces themselves, and here it's integral that you make sure you follow the line of your pattern and make sure that everything lines up to what you planned on doing, because this step is where the alignment of the armor really comes into play, because if you don't cut out your pieces right, then they won't fit together right and they won't look like what you envisioned. Alright, now that we have both pieces cut out, we take it outside and we use what's called a heat gun. And basically what the heat gun does is it heats up the EVA foam so that it's more malleable, and when it heats up, it also closes some of the cells in the foam, the little air bubbles that you see in foam. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to shape it so that it fits the shape that we want, and when the EVA cools down after it's being warmed up, it'll retain more of the shape of what we want. Here you can see Caden using an X-Acto knife again to cut out the alignment cuts that we will be using to shape this even more. When you cut into it like that, you see him using his hands to actually match it up and form it, and you can kind of see what we're trying to go for here. You basically take it and you take some of the material out, and when you put those two lines together, they curve the piece together, and you see me here holding the semi-final product. It's just the two pieces. We cut out those two triangular strips, and now it's formed into this kind of dome shape. And you'll see Caden taking just like a hot glue gun. You're gonna want to use hot glue because it dries quicker, and it's really made for this type of foam work, and it's really good because here we're using a high heat hot glue gun. You can use a low heat one, but I find that the high heat hot glue gun melts a little bit of the foam itself, and it kind of bonds them together. Boop. Now sometimes this step can be tedious and you have to wait for it to dry, and you just make sure you have the patience to make sure that it cools off completely, because if it doesn't, it has the risk of kind of breaking apart because the glue will still be hot and it's not bonded completely. Now what you see me here doing is I'm attaching the two sides together now, and as you can see, it forms this dome shape, and that's what goes over my left shoulder on the armor. And it's oversized, and like I said, it's designed to be oversized, so it's almost it mimics a lot of fantasy tropes where they have oversized pauldrons in armor. Here you see me cutting out the pieces for the leg armor, and I also patterned this. I also used the paper to make sure that I have the patterns for it and to make sure that they're lined up with what I want for the concepts. And here you see me again using the heat gun and putting it against my leg and making sure that it's formed. You see me forming it there a little bit with my hand. Now this is the chest armor, and this chest armor is kind of segmented. You see we're cutting it out of a thicker EVA, this lighter gray EVA stuff. What we're doing is you take panels of it and we're just going to overlap them together so that it looks a little ramshackle. And here you see me a couple times. What I'm doing is I'm taking it and kind of matching it to my body and making sure that it fits well. And you're gonna want to make sure that you check every so often that your alignments for anything that you're doing are correct. You want to make sure you have a mirror handy or somebody to give a second opinion even. It's just to make sure that everything's lined up the way you want it to. Here we're just rounding out the corners using a protractor. Here you see me heating up the pieces with the heat gun again and forming them to my body. You may look like an idiot when you're doing this, but you gotta make sure that everything is aligned and fit to your body, because that makes sure that your final product goes together smoothly. And with builds like this, it's always about what the final product will look like. Each segment you make individually, but you want to make sure that every step that you take, you make sure that everything is according to your plan and what you want the design to look like. Here what Caden is doing is he's making the bracer, and this part is actually pretty quick. He actually did this all in one take, 20 minutes. It's fitted to my arm and it just slips on almost. And basically how we achieve this is the foam itself, it has a little bit of give, a little bit of leeway in terms of compressibility and stretchiness. So when I put my arm into it, it stretches a little bit so that it just about fits around my hand and it doesn't fall off. Here what I'm doing is I'm taking insulation foam and I'm carving the spikes that you see on the armor, the bone looking spikes, and I did this quite a few times. It's a very painstaking task, and I didn't record all of it because I know it's boring, but I took a bunch of EVA and I just drew rough spike designs out of it, and I just carved it until they looked like they fit a point. And I did this a bunch of times. Be patient and make sure you go through with all of it because it is painstaking. I did this for a couple of days. Here you can see that how these spikes fit into the armor, and what we did is we just cut holes into the EVA and just put the spikes in and glued them in the back with hot glue. Here's the finished bracer. And now we move on to the painting, and I'm taking an off-white, so a mix of white and a little bit of yellow and some brown, and I made sure that it's mixed so that it mimics the color of bone, and kind of to give it that kind of, again, fantasy and orcish feel. Here I'm painting the chest piece, the torso piece, and I'm just painting it the same dark gray that everything that's supposed to look like metal is. Here is a very important step. This is the weathering of the piece itself, and basically what I do is I take a couple of different colors, and I go in here. I'm touching it up first, but after this you'll see how I weathered it. Here you see me just taking a brown almost and mixing it with the bone color and making sure that everything's blended and even, and it adds another depth, another layer of texture to the piece. Here you see me taking a paper towel and just wiping off the excess. It's key that you do this in layers and not just try to rush in, because it'll look unnatural. If you just glob on a bunch of brown paint on there, it'll look like it's paint and not actually built up dirt or blood or whatever you're trying to make. Here, as you can see, this is a clean spike without any of the weathering, and here you could see the weathered spike, and you could see that it makes a whole world of difference to the depth and texture. Here are a couple of shots of how we actually made the straps for it and the behind the pieces themselves. And basically what we did is we just took some craft foam and we cut strips out of it and used Velcro and we hot glued it onto the pieces so that they fit around.